All right, so today we are diving deep into witchcraft.
Have fun.
And I think, a lot of people, when they hear that word, they think immediately of like, Halloween decorations and
Right, pointy hats.
yeah, exactly, kind of like stereotypical imagery.
Right.
But I think what we found in the sources is that it's so much deeper and more nuanced than that.
Yeah, it's really a fascinating world. And I was really struck by how much history is intertwined with witchcraft, going all the way back to ancient times.
Yeah. And what's interesting to me is that one of the first things that stood out in these sources is how much misinformation there is about witchcraft.
Oh, absolutely.
Like the stuff we see in, pop culture and movies.
Right. It's like a caricature almost.
Yeah. And I think, for example, one source mentioned that during the Salem witch trials, many of the accused weren't even practicing witchcraft.
That's interesting.
Like they were just social outcasts or people who didn't quite fit in.
That's a really good point. And it kind of shows how, fear and misunderstanding can be used, to control people.
Totally.
And it's interesting that you bring up the Salem witch trials because those events actually had a huge impact on how witchcraft was perceived for centuries.
Oh, for sure.
The hysteria and the negativity surrounding it really contributed to these stereotypes that we still see today.
Yeah. So before we go any further, I think it's important to clear up a common misconception that we see a lot. And that is, people tend to use the terms witchcraft and Wicca interchangeably.
Right.
But it seems like the sources are pretty clear that there's a distinction between the two.
There is definitely a distinction, and it's really crucial to understand the difference.
Okay.
Think of it this way. Witchcraft is the practice. It's like the toolbox, if you will.
Okay.
It's a set of techniques and, practices for working with energy and intention to bring about change.
Got it.
Wicca, on the other hand, is an actual religion that incorporates witchcraft into its system of beliefs and practices.
So it's kind of like Wicca is the house and witchcraft is one of the tools you might find inside the house.
Exactly. That's a perfect analogy.
Okay, cool.
And it's important to note that Wicca is a fairly new religion.
Oh, really?
Yeah, it emerged in the early 20th century, but it draws from much older pagan traditions.
Interesting.
It weaves in nature, worship, and reverence for, the cycles of life and death.
That makes sense. Now let's talk about this magic thing.
Yes.
I'm putting it in air quotes because I know it's not about pulling rabbits out of hats.
Right.
And it's interesting that the sources use an alternate spelling magic with a K at the end.
Right. M-A-G-I-C-K.
Yes, exactly.
And that was actually popularized by Aleister Crowley, who was a big figure in occultism.
Okay.
He adopted that spelling to differentiate it from, stage magic and illusions.
I see.
Magic with a K delves into the realm of personal power and transformation.
So it's more about harnessing energy and intention to create change.
Precisely. It's not about, supernatural powers in the sense of defying the laws of physics.
Right.
But it's about working with energies and potentials that maybe science hasn't fully grasped yet.
Okay, that's fascinating. And one thing that really struck me as we were going through the research is the sheer diversity within witchcraft.
Oh, absolutely.
Like, it's not this monolithic thing. There are so many different types of witches, each with their own unique approaches and areas of focus.
It's true. And one source even said that there are as many types of witches as there are witches.
I love that.
Which is such a great way to put it.
Yes, it really emphasizes the individuality and the personal nature of it all.
Exactly. And, just to give our listeners a taste, we came across green witches who work closely with plants and herbs.
Oh, cool.
Harnessing the earth's energy, for healing and growth.
Right.
And then there's hedge witchcraft.
Hedge witchcraft.
Yeah, which delves into the more spiritual realm, connecting with spirits and, exploring those boundaries between worlds.
Interesting.
And we read about cottage witchcraft, where the focus is on the home and the hearth, creating a sanctuary of peace and abundance. And let's not forget kitchen witchcraft, which infuses everyday cooking and household tasks with magical intention.
So it's like every aspect of life can be infused with this kind of practice.
Exactly. It's about finding magic in the everyday.
And it sounds like there's room for everyone to find their own niche within this world.
Absolutely.
But for someone listening to this and thinking, this all sounds really interesting, where do I even begin?
Right.
The sources did offer some advice for those just starting out.
They did. And the first step might be surprising. It's turning inward.
Okay.
Self-reflection is key.
So before you even start gathering herbs and crystals,
Exactly.
you got to look inside.
You have to ask yourself those fundamental questions like, What draws you to witchcraft?
Yeah.
What are you hoping to gain or explore?
Makes sense.
And they also suggest practical steps like journaling and something called shadow work.
Shadow work. Okay, that sounds a little intimidating.
It can sound intimidating, but it's really about confronting those aspects of ourselves that we tend to hide or deny.
Like our fears or our insecurities.
Exactly, all those negative patterns.
I see.
And the sources suggest that understanding and integrating our shadow selves is essential for personal growth.
And that's part of this witchcraft journey.
It's all interconnected.
Okay, so it's not just about tapping into positive energy and good vibes.
You're right.
It's about acknowledging and working with the full spectrum of who we are.
Exactly. And this leads us to another important aspect that was highlighted in the source's ethics.
Yeah, okay.
Responsible witchcraft is deeply rooted in ethical considerations.
And that might seem counterintuitive given, how it's portrayed sometimes.
Yeah, with the pop culture portrayals.
Right.
But the sources really emphasize the importance of ethical conduct.
Yeah, and we can't forget the Wiccan Rede.
Ah, yes, the Wiccan Rede.
Which essentially boils down to harm none, do what you will.
Right.
It's like a reminder that you have freedom to act, but you have to consider the consequences of your actions.
Exactly. And what's interesting is that even though the Wiccan Rede is specific to Wicca, that concept of ethical conduct seems to permeate, many different witchcraft traditions.
So it's like an overarching principle.
It seems to be.
Now, what about the image of witches gathering in covens?
Oh, the covens.
Is that a requirement for practicing witchcraft, or can you go solo?
That's a common question. And the sources are clear that both solitary practice and coven membership are valid paths.
Okay, so it's not like you have to join a group to be a witch.
Not at all.
So it's more about finding what works best for you and your personal practice.
Exactly.
Okay, but if someone is interested in joining a coven,
right,
what advice did the sources have to offer?
Well, they stress the importance of doing your research.
Okay.
Finding a group whose values and practices align with your own.
Right, so you don't want to just stumble into any coven.
Exactly. And, safety and trust should be top priorities.
Yeah, you don't want to stumble into a coven that's secretly plotting world domination.
Unless, of course, that's your thing.
No judgment here.
But, some sources mentioned that there are covens that operate in secrecy while others are more open.
Interesting.
And the structure of covens can vary quite a bit, too.
So there's no one-size-fits-all?
Not at all.
Some have a hierarchy?
Right, with a high priestess and a high priest.
And others are more egalitarian?
Yeah, with all members being considered equal.
Okay, so there's a lot of diversity even within the coven scene.
Absolutely.
One of the sources actually gave us a glimpse into their personal experience with a group called the Sacred Meadow Circle.
Oh, yes, the Sacred Meadow Circle.
Tell me more about that. What makes them unique?
Well, they're actually a Humanist Wiccan coven.
Okay.
Which, might surprise some people. And they have a very unique structure.
Oh, really?
Yeah, with 3 levels of membership and participation.
Oh, okay.
So there's an online forum for those who are just, starting to explore.
Okay.
And then there are virtual gatherings for connecting with other witches. And then an in-person empowerment group that meets for rituals and, deeper spiritual work.
So you can be part of a coven without actually meeting in person.
Exactly.
That's pretty cool.
It makes witchcraft accessible to people who might not have a local community.
Right.
Or who just prefer to connect online.
That makes a lot of sense. And what I find interesting about the Sacred Meadow Circle is their emphasis on self-initiation and personal development.
Right. They're very big on that.
Even their high priestess and high priest are viewed more as facilitators and guides rather than, figures of authority.
Exactly.
Which is really interesting.
It is.
It aligns with this idea that witchcraft is a journey of empowerment.
Right.
Where you're ultimately responsible for your own growth and development.
Absolutely. And, their structure really underscores the importance of personal exploration.
Yes.
And finding what truly resonates with you within witchcraft.
Yeah, I'm already feeling like my mind is expanding. But before we move on to part 2, I want to hear what's standing out to you so far. What has resonated with you the most?
What I find most intriguing is how witchcraft, despite all the misconceptions and stereotypes,
right,
is ultimately about personal empowerment. Connecting with nature and taking responsibility for your actions.
Yeah.
It's not about seeking power over others, but rather discovering the power within yourself.
I love that.
That's what really stood out to me.
That's a great place to pause.
Okay.
And we will pick up on this thread in part 2.
Sounds good.
Welcome back. I don't know about you, but I'm already hooked.
Me too.
We've uncovered so much about, the core concepts and different branches of witchcraft.
Yeah, the foundation.
But now I'm really curious about the actual practices. Like, what do witches do?
That's where things get really interesting. The sources delve into rituals, spells, and how they work.
Okay, so let's talk rituals. Is it more than just lighting candles and chanting?
It's definitely more than that.
Okay.
It's about structured action performed with focused intention.
Okay.
And rituals often incorporate, specific words, objects, or symbols to amplify that intention.
I see.
And they're not just for, summoning spirits or casting spells.
Oh, so what else are rituals used for?
Well, think of them as a way to connect with a deeper part of yourself and the energies around you.
Okay.
You can use rituals for personal growth healing, celebrating seasonal cycles, honoring nature, or even just creating a sense of sacred space in your daily life.
Okay, that makes sense.
Right.
One source described a self-love ritual bath that sounded amazing.
Oh.
Like you treat your bathtub like a cauldron.
Right.
You add herbs and oils, and you basically soak in the energy of self-care.
It's like a spa day with intention.
Exactly. I love it. That's definitely a ritual I could get behind.
For sure.
And it sounds like rituals can be as simple or as elaborate as you like.
Absolutely.
Another source talked about the importance of creating a sacred space before doing any kind of magical work.
Right. You want to set the stage.
Yeah, and they described a ritual for opening and closing a circle, which involves calling upon the elements and setting up a boundary of energy for protection and focus.
It's like creating a container for your magical practice.
Okay, so rituals are like the foundation for any kind of magical practice, providing structure and intention.
The groundwork.
But now let's talk about the thing everyone's curious about: spells. What exactly are they and how do they work?
Ah, yes. The spells.
Everyone wants to know.
Well, think of spells as rituals with a specific goal in mind.
Okay.
You're using focused energy and intention to manifest a desired outcome.
Got it.
And spells often combine spoken words called incantations.
Incantations.
Yes, with actions and symbolic objects or ingredients.
So it's like a recipe, but instead of baking a cake,
Right.
You're conjuring a change in your reality.
Exactly.
Okay.
The incantations you use often have a rhythm or rhyme to them, which helps to focus the energy.
I see.
And the objects and ingredients you choose are selected for their symbolic associations with what you want to bring about.
So, for example, if you're doing a spell for attracting love,
Right.
you might use rose petals because they're connected to romance.
Exactly. Or if it's for protection, maybe rosemary for its warding properties.
Okay, that makes sense. So where do you even learn how to do spells? Is there like a Spells for Dummies book out there?
Well, there are definitely lots of books and resources available.
Okay.
But the sources we read really stress the importance of personalizing your spell work.
So it's not just about following a formula.
It's not a one-size-fits-all.
Yeah.
It's about tapping into your own intuition and understanding of energy.
Okay, so experimentation is key.
Absolutely.
One source even suggested that something as simple as making a wish on a dandelion or blowing out candles on a birthday cake could be considered a form of spell casting because you're putting intention and energy behind a desired outcome.
Right. You're setting an intention and focusing your energy.
So maybe we've all done a little spell work without even realizing it.
Perhaps we have.
Whoa. That's pretty mind-blowing.
Right.
Okay, so we've got rituals for structure and intention.
Right.
Spells for specific outcomes.
Right.
And apparently we're all casting spells left and right.
Maybe so.
But what about the actual magic part? How does that work exactly?
Ah, the million-dollar question.
Right.
Well, the sources offer some intriguing insights into that.
Okay.
One recurring theme is this idea of magic as a way of working with energy.
Okay.
Which is believed that everything in the universe is made up of energy. And that you can learn to manipulate and direct that energy through intention and ritual.
So it's almost like witches are energy conductors.
That's a great way to put it.
Channeling and shaping this universal energy flow to create change.
Precisely.
Okay, that makes sense. But then some sources also brought up the power of the subconscious mind.
Right, the inner world.
Which adds a whole other layer to the equation.
It does.
So how does that play into it?
Well, some witches believe that a big part of magic is about influencing the subconscious mind. You know, remember how we talked about humanist Wiccans viewing deities as symbolic representations of human nature?
Yeah.
Well, that same principle can be applied to spell work.
Okay.
It's not about invoking an external force, but tapping into your own inner power.
So are you saying they're basically reprogramming their own mental software to create change from within?
That's a great way to think about it.
That's fascinating.
It is.
So we've got energy manipulation and subconscious mind hacking.
Right.
Are there any other theories about how the magic actually works?
Well, some witches believe it's a combination of all these factors plus something more.
Okay.
Whether you call it divine intervention, spiritual guidance, or simply the interconnectedness of all things. There's this sense that we're tapping into forces beyond our full comprehension.
And it's that mystery that makes this whole topic so captivating, right?
Exactly. It's that sense of wonder.
Now, we've talked about, the Wiccan Rede and the concept of harming none.
Right.
But are there any other ethical considerations that are specific to spell work? Yeah, definitely. Like what?
Well, the sources mentioned right action.
Right action.
Yeah. It's about considering the potential consequences of your spells.
Okay.
And ensuring that your actions are aligned with your values.
So you wouldn't cast a spell to get a promotion.
Right.
If it meant someone else would lose their job.
Exactly. A witch who follows the principle of right action would find a more ethical way to achieve their goal.
Okay.
Maybe through a spell to boost their skills or attract new opportunities.
So it's about working with the universe, not trying to manipulate or exploit it.
Precisely.
Okay. And this focus on ethical conduct really distinguishes witchcraft from, those darker portrayals of magic that we see in fiction.
Oh, absolutely.
Okay, so it's not just about getting whatever you want.
Right.
There's a moral compass guiding your actions.
There is.
And I think that's really important to emphasize.
It is.
Because I think a lot of people have this misconception that it's all about, personal gain and power.
Right.
But it seems like it's much more nuanced than that. And what I find inspiring is that the sources really frame witchcraft not just as a practice, but as a journey of self-discovery and growth.
Yeah. It's a path of evolution.
So it's not just about spells and rituals.
Right.
It's about using those tools to evolve as a person.
Exactly.
No.
Witches often use rituals, meditation, and divination practices to delve deeper into their inner world.
Okay.
Connect with their intuition and explore those shadow aspects we talked about earlier.
Right. So it's like witchcraft provides a framework for self-empowerment where you're constantly learning, evolving, and becoming more aligned with your true self.
Beautifully put.
Okay, I'm officially hooked.
Right.
But before we wrap up this part, I have one more burning question.
Okay.
We've talked about the tools and the techniques.
Right.
But are there specific beliefs or deities that are central to the practice?
That's where things get even more diverse.
Okay.
There's no one set of beliefs or deities that all witches adhere to. Okay, so we're back for the final part of our deep dive into witchcraft.
Well, we've covered a lot of ground.
We have.
But I think there's one area that I'm really eager to explore a little bit further.
Yep.
We've talked about, how some witches work with deities while others connect with nature spirits or ancestral energies.
Right.
Can we unpack that a bit more?
Absolutely. The spiritual dimension of witchcraft is just as multifaceted as the practices themselves.
Right.
There's no one-size-fits-all belief system,
Okay.
You might find witches who honor specific pantheons,
Right.
while others feel a stronger connection to the natural world or their ancestral lineage.
Okay, so let's start with the pantheons.
Yeah.
What are some of the most common ones that we came across in the sources?
Well, the Celtic pantheon pops up quite frequently. Witches who work with this tradition might honor deities like Cernunnos,
Okay.
the horned god associated with nature and the wild hunt,
Okay.
or Brigid, the goddess of healing, poetry, and smithcraft.
Yeah, those names definitely ring a bell,
Right.
especially from, mythology and folklore.
Yeah, they're very prominent.
But how do witches actually engage with these deities? Is it like praying to a higher power?
It's a bit more nuanced than that, I would say.
Okay.
Think of it as a relationship
Okay.
built on respect and reciprocity. Witches might honor the deities through offerings rituals or simply by acknowledging their presence in nature.
I see.
And in turn, they might seek guidance, inspiration, or support from these deities.
So it's a two-way street.
It is a dialogue rather than a one-sided plea.
But how do they know if the deities are actually listening or responding?
Right.
Do they get, divine texts or something?
Not quite.
Okay.
The sources suggest that communication with deities is often more subtle.
Okay.
It might come through dreams, intuitive nudges, or signs and symbols in nature.
So it's about paying attention to those whispers of wisdom that might come from beyond our usual perception.
Exactly. It's about being attuned to those subtle cues.
Okay. And another pantheon that came up quite a bit in the research was the Greek pantheon.
Oh, yes, the Greek pantheon. Very popular.
You might encounter witches who work with Hecate, the goddess of witchcraft and crossroads.
Yes, a very powerful figure.
Or Artemis, the goddess of the hunt and wild animals.
Right. She's a favorite among many witches.
Hecky, now there's a goddess with a powerful presence.
She is definitely a force to be reckoned with.
Yeah.
You know, her association with witchcraft magic and those liminal spaces between worlds makes her a very compelling figure.
Okay, so we've got Celtic deities, Greek deities, and I'm assuming there are countless other pantheons out there.
Oh, countless.
Do witches typically stick to one, or can they draw inspiration from multiple traditions?
That's a good question. And it seems like there's no hard and fast rule.
Okay.
Some witches might focus on a pantheon that aligns with their ancestry or personal beliefs.
Right.
While others might feel drawn to deities from various cultures and traditions.
So it's really about finding what resonates with your own spiritual journey. It's like creating your own divine tapestry.
I love that.
Weaving together threads of inspiration from different sources.
Yes, and it really speaks to that emphasis on personal exploration and intuition that we see throughout witchcraft. You know, it's not about dogma or rigid rules. It's about what feels authentic and meaningful to you.
Now, we've talked about how some witches, particularly those who identify as Humanist Wiccans, view deities as symbolic representations of human nature.
Yes.
But what about those who believe in deities as literal supernatural beings? How do they perceive their relationship with these gods and goddesses?
Well, many of the sources described it as a relationship built on reverence, respect, and a sense of partnership. It's not about worshiping, you know, a distant, all-powerful entity, but about recognizing the divine as a presence that exists alongside us. A force that we can connect with and learn from.
So it's more like walking beside a wise mentor than kneeling before a king.
Exactly.
Okay.
And the sources suggest that witches often approach deities with a sense of humility, recognizing that they're not seeking to control or manipulate these forces, but to work in harmony with them.
That makes sense, but where did these deities come from? How did their stories and attributes develop? I mean, we're talking about beliefs that have been passed down through generations.
We are. You're right. Many of the deities we see in witchcraft have roots in ancient pagan traditions. Some dating back thousands of years.
Wow.
And these beliefs often originated, you know, in close connection with nature. Reflecting the cycles of the seasons, the elements, the mysteries of life and death.
So it's about honoring those primal forces that have shaped human experience for centuries.
Exactly.
And it's important to remember that these beliefs have evolved over time.
They have.
Adapting to different cultures and contexts.
Right.
The way we understand these deities today is shaped by, you know, our own modern perspectives and interpretations.
Absolutely. We're looking back through the lens of our own time and culture.
Right. But what about those witches who don't work with deities at all? What's their spiritual focus?
That's where the diversity of witchcraft really shines. Many witches find their spiritual connection through nature itself. They might honor the cycles of the seasons, the elements, the energy of the earth, or the spirits of plants and animals.
So it's a more pantheistic view, seeing the divine as woven into the fabric of the natural world.
Exactly. And they might express their reverence through rituals, offerings, or simply by spending time in nature. Attuning themselves to its rhythms and wisdom.
It's about finding the sacred in the everyday.
Yes. The extraordinary and the ordinary.
I love that. But we also came across the idea of connecting with ancestors or spirit guides, right?
Yes. For some witches, the spiritual dimension includes tapping into a lineage of wisdom and guidance, both from their own bloodline and from the unseen realms. They might communicate with their ancestors or spirit guides through meditation, divination, or dream work. Seeking their counsel and support.
It's like creating a spiritual support system. Drawing strength from those who came before. And those who walk beside us in the unseen realms.
Beautifully put. And it underscores that sense of interconnectedness that runs through so much of witchcraft. That idea that we're not isolated individuals, but part of a web that extends through time and space.
Wow, this has been such an incredible journey.
It has.
I feel like we've only scratched the surface of this vast and fascinating world.
We have. There's so much more to explore.
But one thing's for sure, witchcraft is so much more than those stereotypes and misconceptions.
Oh, absolutely.
That often surround it.
It is.
It's a path of personal empowerment. Spiritual exploration. And deep connection with nature.
Absolutely.
It's about finding your own unique way to tap into that power that resides within you. And the world around you.
It's a journey of self-discovery.
And to our listeners, I hope this deep dive has sparked your curiosity.
I hope so.
And maybe even inspired you to embark on your own exploration of witchcraft.
Yes.
Remember, There's no one right way to practice.
Absolutely not.
It's all about finding what resonates with your own heart and soul.
Well said.
Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive into witchcraft.
It was my pleasure.
And until next time, keep seeking, keep exploring, and keep the magic alive.
Blessed be.